Klaxons screeched as the Voxari exploration ship's scanners detected a massive thermonuclear detonation on the uncharted Deathworld below, the destructive power dwarfing anything Captain Voller had encountered in his centuries traversing the stars. The blue-green planet, its landmasses obscured beneath swirling white clouds, had seemed almost peaceful from a distance. But now, as Voller gaped at the radiation readings flashing insistently across the bridge displays, the true nature of this world became terrifyingly clear. Earth. That's what the inhabitants called this planet, according to the radio transmissions the Voxari had intercepted. Volar leaned forward in his chair, manipulating the hollow screen to zoom in on the planet's surface. Scans showed sprawling cities, teeming with billions of sapient life forms. The same life forms whose military communications boasted of weapons that could incinerate entire continents. The same life forms whose news broadcasts triumphantly reported the latest conquests in their incessant wars and gleefully detailed the most depraved acts of violence. The same life forms whose popular entertainment reveled in gore and brutality. It was inconceivable. In all his explorations on behalf of the Galactic Council, Voller had never encountered a civilization so reckless, so bloodthirsty. The Voxari had achieved interstellar travel through cooperation and the pursuit of knowledge. But these humans, if the translations were accurate, seemed hell-bent on destroying themselves and their planet. Already, the ship's sensors had logged evidence of irreparable environmental damage, numerous extinct species, and irradiated wastelands. Class 5. Deathworld, the ship AI intoned solemnly, as if there had been any doubt. The highest possible hazard rating. As Voller struggled to comprehend the sheer hostility of life on Earth, an even more disturbing thought struck him. A species this savage and warlike, armed with atomics and teetering on the brink of self-annihilation, could not be allowed to spread to the stars. The Council would never tolerate such an existential threat to galactic peace. Yet the humans were advancing. Radio telescopes studied the heavens. Satellites mapped the solar system. And now, incredibly, they had detected the cloaked Voxari ship. Voller's eyes widened as new readings flooded in. Primitive vehicles surrounded the planet, bristling with explosive projectiles. Population centers erupted into chaos as the authorities, no doubt as paranoid and reactive as the rest of their kind, spread news of the alien presence. It would only be a matter of time before they attempted contact, or worse, lashed out in irrational violence. Helm, lay in a course for Council space. Voller's voice held a note of dread. And send an emergency transmission to the Grand Assembly. We've found it. We've found a Class 5 Deathworld with the tools to blight the galaxy. May the ancestors have mercy on us all. As the tense standoff between the Voxari ship and Earth's fighter jets reached a fever pitch, Voller made the gut-wrenching decision to break orbit and flee the volatile situation. His clawed fingers flew over the control panel, initiating the departure sequence. "Get us out of here now!" Voller barked at his crew. "We can't risk further engagement with these unpredictable savages. Set a course for the nearest Council outpost." The ship shuddered as its engines roared to life, propelling the sleek vessel away from the blue-green planet that had proven far more dangerous than any of them had anticipated. But as they accelerated toward the safety of open space, a new threat emerged. "Captain, incoming projectile from the surface!" the sensor operator shouted, his voice permeated with disbelief. It's some kind of primitive missile." Volar's eyes widened in shock as he watched the plume of smoke and fire streak towards his ship on the monitor. The humans were attacking. After all his efforts to avoid a confrontation, these barbaric creatures had still lashed out with unprovoked violence. "Evasive maneuvers!" Voller commanded, gripping his chair as the ship lurched to the side. "Activate defense screens." The bridge crew worked frantically, their fingers flying over consoles as they tried to evade the incoming missile. The projectile detonated just off their starboard bow, the shockwave slamming into the Voxari ship like a hammer blow. Alarms blared and warning lights flashed, but miraculously, the vessel's advanced energy shields held firm. On Earth, confusion reigned in the military command centers tasked with monitoring the alien presence. The missile launch had been an accident, a catastrophic malfunction in an aging computer system, but the damage was done. As far as the Voxari were concerned, they were under attack by a hostile and savage species. Volar knew he had to act fast. If the humans possessed weapons capable of breaching his ship's defenses, then every moment spent in Earth's orbit was a moment too long. He had to get this information back to the Council, to warn them of the danger posed by this Deathworld and its nuclear-armed inhabitants. "Emergency FTL now!" Volar commanded, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. "Get us out of this system before they launch another attack!" The Voxari ship leaped forward, the stars blurring into streaks of light as it accelerated to faster-than-light speeds. In a flash, it vanished from Earth's skies, leaving only a fading energy signature for the planet's satellites and telescopes to detect. On the surface, the sudden departure of the alien vessel sparked both alarm and confusion. Governments scrambled to make sense of the situation while scientists pored over the data in a desperate attempt to understand what had happened. Dr. Gary Howard, one of the few experts who had advocated for peaceful contact, watched the news reports with a heavy heart. He had warned against taking a confrontational stance, had argued that any civilization capable of crossing the vast gulf between the stars was unlikely to be hostile. But his pleas had fallen on deaf ears, drowned out by the clamor for a show of strength in the face of the unknown. As the Voxari ship raced towards the nearest council outpost, Captain Volar sat in his quarters, his palms sweating from the events of the past few hours. He had always known that the universe was a dangerous place, that there were species out there that posed a threat to the fragile peace maintained by the Galactic Council, but never, in his wildest dreams, had he imagined encountering a civilization like the humans. A species that somehow managed to survive on a world that would have killed most other life forms within days. A species that had harnessed the power of the atom, not for peaceful purposes, but to build weapons capable of annihilating entire cities. A species that even now teetered on the brink of self-destruction, seemingly hell-bent on tearing itself apart through endless wars and conflicts. Volar knew that his report to the Council would be met with shock and disbelief. Some might even accuse him of exaggeration or alarmism. But he had seen the evidence with his own eyes, had witnessed firsthand the savagery and destructive potential of these humans. And he knew, with a sinking feeling in his gut, that if they ever managed to spread beyond their own system, they could pose a threat to the very fabric of galactic civilization itself. As the ship hurtled through the void, Volar began to prepare his formal assessment for the Council. He would need to be thorough to present his findings in a way that left no room for doubt or uncertainty. The future of the stars might well depend on his words, on his ability to convey the urgency of the situation. But even as he worked, Volar couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that the encounter with Earth was merely the opening salvo in a conflict that could shape the course of history for generations to come. And as he stared out at the stars streaking past his viewport, he couldn't help but wonder what role he and his ship would play in the momentous events that were about to unfold. Volar's ship burst out of FTL, the sudden deceleration rattling his bones. Through the viewport, he saw the gleaming spires of the Galactic Council outpost. His claws tapped frantically at the comms panel. "This is Captain Volar of the Voxari Exploration Corps. I have an urgent report for the Council. Request immediate clearance to dock." Minutes later, Volar strode into the Council chambers. The representatives of a dozen species sat in a semicircle, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. "Esteemed Council members," Volar began, his voice tight, "I come before you with grave news. We've discovered a Class 5 Deathworld." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Volar activated a holoprojector, displaying images of Earth. The inhabitants call it Earth. They're pre-FTL but dangerously advanced. They possess weapons of mass destruction capable of devastating entire continents. "Impossible," scoffed a Zentari counselor. "No pre-FTL species could be a genuine threat." Volar's eyes narrowed. "With respect, counselor, you're wrong. Let me show you." He played back intercepted broadcasts. Scenes of warfare flashed across the screen. Tanks rolling through bombed-out cities. Mushroom clouds blooming over wastelands. The counselors recoiled as gory news footage gave way to even more violent entertainment programming. "This is what they consider recreation," Voller said grimly. "And it gets worse. My ship was nearly destroyed by an unprovoked missile attack. We barely escaped." The council chambers erupted in heated debate. Some dismissed Voller's warnings as alarmist. Others demanded immediate action. "We can't ignore this," declared the Arxian representative. "If these humans ever reach the stars, they could destabilize the entire galaxy." After hours of deliberation, the council reached a decision. They would dispatch a stealth mission to gather more intelligence on humanity. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Gary Howard paced in his office. News of the alien encounter had leaked, sparking global panic. He clicked on the TV. "Military sources confirmed the object was hostile," a newscaster announced. "The president has authorized a massive increase in defense spending." Gary switched it off in disgust. He believed peaceful contact was still possible, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. Outside his window, he saw protesters marching. Some carried signs calling for peace. Others demanded preemptive strikes against any future alien visitors. As Earth seethed with fear and speculation, a Galactic Council stealth ship slipped into the asteroid belt. Its crew began their covert observations, unaware that the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. The Galactic Council stealth ship hovered silently in the asteroid belt, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to Earth's primitive sensors. Inside the ship's command center, Captain Zarek stared at the holographic display with growing alarm. "By the void, they've done it," he muttered, his four eyes widening. "They've actually managed to reverse engineer our technology." The intercepted transmission scrolled across the screen, detailing the humans' rapid progress in adapting the salvaged Voxari defenses. Zarek watched in disbelief as grainy footage showed a prototype warhead detonating with terrifying power, far beyond anything humans should have been capable of producing. "Send an emergency transmission to the Council," Zarek ordered. "Code Black. This situation has become untenable." Hours later, the Council chambers erupted into chaos as the representatives digested the dire news from Earth. "We cannot allow this to continue," the Arxian delegate thundered, slamming a tentacle against the podium. "If these humans harness our technology, they could threaten worlds across the galaxy." After heated debate, a consensus emerged. The Voxari representative, his scales shimmering with tension, stepped forward. "We will send our best operatives to neutralize this threat," he declared. "Agent Dravik will lead the mission." Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Gary Howard pored over the data from the alien encounter, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Suddenly, he sat bolt upright. "This is it," he whispered. "The key to communication." Howard rushed to present his findings, bursting into a high-level meeting at the Pentagon. General Marcus Grayson, a bear of a man with a permanent scowl, glared at the interruption. "Dr. Howard, this had better be important," Grayson growled. "It is, General," Howard insisted. "I've found a way to establish dialogue with the aliens. We can avoid conflict, work together." Grayson cut him off with a dismissive wave. "Spare me your pacifist nonsense, Doctor. We're on the verge of cracking their tech wide open. In a matter of months, we'll have weapons that will make us untouchable." "But sir, the risks." "Risks?" Grayson barked a laugh. "The only risk is letting this opportunity slip through our fingers. Dismissed, Doctor." As Howard's pleas fell on deaf ears, a Voxari stealth shuttle pierced Earth's atmosphere under cover of darkness. Agent Dravik, his features obscured by advanced holographic camouflage, led his team onto American soil. "Remember," Dravik hissed to his operatives, "our mission is sabotage only. We cannot risk direct confrontation." The Voxari agents dispersed across the globe, targeting research facilities and production centers tied to the new weapons program. In a lab in Nevada, delicate circuitry mysteriously shorted out. A prototype warhead in Siberia inexplicably failed during a critical test. Key data vanished from secure servers in Beijing. General Grayson raged at the setbacks, pushing his teams to work harder, faster. Dr. Howard continued his desperate attempts to open a channel of communication, even as Grayson's hardline stance grew more entrenched. With each passing day, the stakes grew higher. The humans raced to unlock the secrets of alien technology, while Dravik's team worked tirelessly to derail their efforts. Earth had become a secret battleground, with the future of the cosmos hanging in the balance. In the council chambers light years away, the representatives debated their next move with growing urgency. The Voxari delegate's voice was grim as he addressed his peers. "We must decide," he intoned. "Do we continue our covert efforts, or take more drastic action to neutralize this threat once and for all?" Agent Dravik crouched in the shadows of a Nevada research facility, his camouflage suit blending seamlessly with the concrete walls. He watched as a human scientist input a code, the reinforced door sliding open with a hiss. Dravik slipped inside, undetected. The lab buzzed with activity. Dravik's eyes narrowed as he spotted the prototype, a sleek missile casing that pulsed with an eerie blue light. He pulled out a compact device and attached it to the nearest computer terminal. Lines of code flashed across the screen as the virus wormed its way into the system. Alarms blared. Dravik tensed, but the humans rushed past him, oblivious to his presence. The prototype sparked and sputtered, smoke billowing from its casing. Dravik allowed himself a small smile as he exfiltrated the facility. Meanwhile, in a hidden base halfway across the globe, Agent Kailash paced restlessly. His scales rippled with agitation as he addressed his rogue cell. "Dravik is a fool," Kailash hissed. "These humans are too dangerous to be left alive. We must strike now, before it's too late." He pulled up a holographic display, faces of human scientists and military leaders flickering in the air. "These are our targets. We'll start with their leader, this General Grayson." Dravik's communicator chirped, "Kailash, stand down, that's an order." Kailash crushed the device in his clawed hand. "No more orders, no more half measures. We end this now." In the Pentagon, General Grayson leaned over a workbench, his face illuminated by the glow of alien tech. "We're close," he muttered. "So damn close." A shadow moved in his peripheral vision. Grayson turned, his eyes widening in shock. "What the—" The silenced shot echoed through the room. Grayson crumpled to the floor, his life's work incomplete. Panic gripped the world's governments. Security forces swarmed research facilities. Scientists were placed under armed guard. But for Dr. Gary Howard, the chaos presented an opportunity. He sprinted through the corridors of a communications facility, alarms blaring in his wake. Armed guards shouted, their footsteps thundering behind him. Howard skidded into the control room, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Come on, he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. The message flashed on the screen. Transmission sent. In the depths of space, a Voxari operative's eyes widened as the unexpected signal pinged their sensors. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth." The council chambers erupted into chaos. The Arxian representatives' tentacles writhed in agitation. "This changes everything. We must cease operations immediately." Dravik received the recall order with a mixture of relief and frustration. He gathered his team, preparing for extraction, but Kailash was nowhere to be found. As the dust settled, Dr. Howard stood before a hastily assembled group of world leaders. "They've received our message," he announced, his voice thick with emotion. "They're sending a diplomatic envoy." The atmosphere was tense as final preparations were made for the historic meeting. On the outskirts of Earth's orbit, the Council's diplomatic vessel dropped out of FTL, its sleek form gliding towards the blue planet. But in the shadows of an asteroid, Kailash's stealth fighter lurked. His eyes gleamed with fanatic intensity as he targeted the approaching ship. "For the good of the galaxy," he whispered, his claw tightening on the trigger. The diplomatic vessel's shields flared as Kailash's first salvo struck home. On Earth, Dr. Howard watched in horror as explosions blossomed in the night sky, the fragile hope for peace hanging by a thread. The diplomatic vessel shuddered as Kylaz's stealth fighter unleashed its devastating barrage. Brilliant beams of energy sliced through the shields, carving glowing gashes across the hull. Atmosphere vented into space in hissing plumes. On the bridge, Captain Voller stumbled as the deck bucked beneath his feet. Warning klaxons shrieked. Crew members' voices rose in a cacophony of shouted status reports and frantic commands. Shields down to 12%. Hull breach on deck 3. Weapons systems unresponsive. Volar gripped his command chair. Return fire! All batteries! But it was too late. The outer airlock chambers ruptured. Dr. Gary Howard felt a sickening lurch as the artificial gravity failed. Then came a roar of escaping air. He clawed desperately at a handrail as the vacuum seized him, yanking him off his feet. Howard's eyes bulged, his lungs burning, as he was sucked into the void along with the rest of the human delegation. The void of space engulfed him. Icy pinpricks peppered his skin as his blood began to boil. Blackness crept in at the edges of his vision. Inside the ship, Security Captain Dravik sprinted for the shuttle bay. His claws skittered on the deck plates as he vaulted into the cockpit of an armed interceptor. The bay doors cycled open and he punched the thrusters, rocketing out in pursuit of Kylaz's fighter. Streaks of coherent light lanced between the two ships as they dove and rolled through a lethal dance. Dravik's shuttle shuddered as a near miss scorched its hull. On Earth, radar operators gaped at their screens. General Reeves leaned over a lieutenant's shoulder, his face illuminated by scrolling data. What the hell is going on up there? Sir, we're detecting weapons fire in low orbit. It looks like some kind of space battle. Reeves' expression resolute. Scramble the first space wing, now. Moments later, sleek fighters roared off runways across the globe, their pilots' hands wrapped around control sticks grafted from alien tech. As they climbed, weapons that had only existed in science fiction a year ago hummed to life. Meanwhile, a Voxari emergency team raced against time. They deployed a pulsing energy net, scooping up the bodies tumbling through space. Most were already lifeless husks. But as they reeled in Dr. Howard, faint life signs flickered on their scanners. They enveloped him in a shimmering force field, halting the ravages of vacuum exposure. On the bridge of the crippled ship, Captain Voller nursed a bleeding gash on his forehead. His voice was grim as he addressed his communications officer. Send this message to the rogue fighter. Stand down immediately, or we will be forced to initiate the Omega Protocol. The battle raged on. Dravik's shuttle wove through a storm of weapons fire as Earth fighters joined the fray. Energy beams and missiles crisscrossed the night sky in a deadly light show. Inside the ship's medical bay, Dr. Howard's eyes fluttered open. His throat felt raw, his limbs leaden. A Voxari medic hovered over him, adjusting some alien apparatus. The others? Howard croaked. The medic's multifaceted eyes blinked slowly. I'm sorry, you were the only survivor. Howard struggled to his feet, waving off the medic's protests. He staggered towards the bridge, each step sending waves of pain through his battered body. He had to stop this madness before it was too late. Outside, Dravik's shuttle rocked as Kylaz scored a direct hit. Atmosphere vented from a ragged hole in the fuselage. Gritting his teeth, Dravik lined up one final shot. A pulsing orb of energy leapt from his weapons array, latching on to Kylaz's fighter. Arcs of destructive power crawled across its hull. Both ships began to tumble, caught in Earth's gravitational pull. Kylaz's fighter plummeted faster, trailing debris as it entered the atmosphere. A signal pulsed from the doomed craft. The antimatter warhead was armed. Dravik's shuttle plunged after it. His claws danced over the controls, plotting an intercept course. Warnings flashed as the heat of re-entry built. With seconds to spare, Dravik triggered his final weapon. A swirling vortex of gravitic energy erupted from the shuttle. It enveloped Kylaz's craft, warping space itself. The fighter's trajectory bent, curving away from Earth and out into space. The antimatter detonation blossomed harmlessly in the void. Dravik had no time to savor his victory. His crippled shuttle slammed into the atmosphere. The last thing he saw was the ground rushing up to meet him. Recovery teams converged on the crash site. They pulled Dravik's broken body from the wreckage, rushing him to awaiting medical transport. Others combed the area, securing any trace of alien tech. High above, an uneasy calm settled over the battered Voxari ship. Captain Voller sagged in his chair, exhaustion etched on his features. He looked up as the bridge doors hissed open. Dr. Howard limped in, his face pale, but Dr. Howard stood on the bridge of the Voxari ship, his eyes fixed on Captain Voller. The alien's scales shimmered under the ethereal lighting, a stark reminder of the vast differences between their species. "Captain," Howard said, his voice hoarse from his ordeal, "we must move past this violence. Kailash was an extremist, not representative of humanity's true desires." Volar's multifaceted eyes blinked slowly. "Your words carry weight, Dr. Howard, but the wounds are fresh." Howard stepped closer, his hands spread in a gesture of openness. "I understand, but think of the lives at stake, both human and alien. We have a chance for real peace, real cooperation." The bridge fell silent as Voller considered. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. The Council's directives are clear. We will proceed with negotiations." Howard's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you, Captain. You won't regret this." Volar gestured to a nearby corridor. "Perhaps a tour of our vessel will help foster understanding between our peoples." They moved through the ship's winding passageways. Howard gaped at holographic displays that seemed to defy physics and machinery that hummed with unimaginable power. "This is incredible," Howard breathed, running his hand along a pulsing conduit. "The potential for advancement for both our species." Volar nodded, a hint of pride in his posture. The Galactic Council believes in shared progress, in lifting all sentient life to new heights of enlightenment. Their tour led them to a vast chamber filled with swirling holograms and chattering alien scientists. One of the Voxari approached, its tentacles writhing with agitation. "Captain," it burbled, "we've detected something disturbing." The holograms coalesced into a map of nearby star systems. Angry red tendrils snaked between the stars, pulsing ominously. "What am I looking at?" Howard asked, a chill running down his spine. The scientist's voice quavered. "Cosmic distortions, space-time anomalies unlike anything we've ever seen. They're centered around Earth, spreading outward." Volar turned to Howard, his expression grave. "Some on the Council believe these anomalies may be linked to your species. Perhaps an unintended consequence of your weapons research, or—" He trailed off, leaving the darker implications unspoken. Howard staggered back, his legs shaking. This can't be possible. We had no idea." "Intended or not," Voller said, "the fabric of reality itself is unraveling. If we don't act quickly, the entire galaxy may be at risk." Howard nodded, his face pale. "We need to convene an emergency summit. Earth's leaders, your council, everyone." Within hours, the ship's main conference chamber buzzed with activity. Holographic projections of Earth's most powerful figures flickered to life around the table, facing the assembled alien delegates. Howard stood at the center, his voice steady despite the weight of trillions of lives on his shoulders. "Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Galactic Council, we face a crisis beyond imagination. Our very universe is in peril. We must set aside our differences and work together, or face annihilation." Voices rose in anger and fear. Accusations flew back and forth. Howard caught Voller's eye across the chaos, a silent understanding passing between them. This was their moment, their chance to forge an alliance that could save not just their own worlds, but all of reality itself. As the arguments raged around them, Howard took a deep breath and prepared to make the speech of his life. Dr. Gary Howard's voice rang out clear and steady, cutting through the cacophony of arguments. "We stand at the precipice of annihilation. Our petty differences mean nothing in the face of this threat. We must unite or perish." The holographic figures of Earth's leaders fell silent, their faces etched with a mix of fear and reluctant acceptance. Captain Voller's multifaceted eyes blinked slowly as he surveyed the room. "Dr. Howard speaks truth," Voller said, his voice a low rumble. The Council agrees to this alliance, however tenuous it may be. Within hours, the ship's laboratories buzzed with activity. Human scientists in rumpled lab coats worked alongside Voxari researchers, their tentacles dancing over alien consoles. The air crackled with an uneasy energy as two vastly different scientific traditions collided. Dr. Eliza Chen, a brilliant quantum physicist from MIT, threw up her hands in frustration. This is nonsense. Your so-called enlightened reasoning completely ignores the fundamental constants of our universe. Her Voxari counterpart, a being of shimmering energy fields named Zixilorp, pulsed with agitation. Your constants are mere illusions, artifacts of limited human perception. Howard stepped between them, his face lined with exhaustion. Enough! We can't afford this bickering. Strip away your assumptions. Look at the raw data. Gradually, the conflicts gave way to collaboration. Holographic displays flickered with streams of information from deep space probes. A young astronomer gasped, her finger tracing a pattern in the swirling data. "There!" she exclaimed. "The epicenter! It's in our own backyard!" The assembled scientists crowded around the display. Howard's eyes widened as he realized the implications. A red dwarf system just beyond Pluto's orbit. How did we miss this? Alarms blared throughout the ship. Captain Vohler's voice crackled over the intercom. "All personnel, prepare for immediate deployment. We move on the anomaly." The next hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Howard found himself strapped into a sleek shuttle alongside a team of human astronauts and Voxari commandos. Captain Vohler occupied the pilot's seat, his clawed hands dancing over alien controls. As they approached the uncharted system, the shuttle's sensors screamed warnings. The viewport filled with a nightmare vista of twisted space-time. Miniature black holes winked in and out of existence, each detonation sending ripples of distortion through the fabric of reality. "Evasive maneuvers!" Vohler barked. The shuttle lurched sickeningly as antimatter shockwaves buffeted its hull. Howard gripped his restraints, fingers tightening, as impossible geometries unfolded before his eyes. A Voxari scientist activated a probe launcher. Sleek, silvery devices streaked towards the heart of the anomaly. Seconds later, they imploded, crushed by unimaginable gravitational forces. Volar's voice was grim. "We have no choice. We must go in ourselves." The shuttle plunged deeper into the maelstrom. Howard's stomach roiled as space itself seemed to fold and twist around them. Through gaps in the chaos, he caught glimpses of something vast and incomprehensible. "My God," he whispered, "what is that?" At the epicenter of the distortions loomed a structure of impossible scale and complexity. Its surfaces gleamed with otherworldly energies, its angles defying Euclidean geometry. Before anyone could react, the megastructure pulsed with blinding light. A shockwave of pure force slammed into the shuttle, sending it tumbling end over end. "We've lost primary power," Volar shouted over the screech of tearing metal. "Auxiliary systems failing." Howard clung to consciousness as alarms wailed and emergency lights flashed. The shuttle spun wildly, hurtling back through the cosmic obstacle course they'd so narrowly navigated. Each second brought them closer to annihilation at the hands of unknown cosmic architects. Forces. Emergency thrusters fired, straining against the pull of warped space-time. Gary clung to his seat as the shuttle's hull groaned under the stress. "Structural integrity at 23%, shouted the Voxari pilot, his tentacles dancing across alien controls. Gary's eyes widened as a massive shape loomed through the viewport. The Voxari flagship materialized, its protective fields rippling against the cosmic onslaught. Tractor beams lashed out, enveloping the battered shuttle and pulling it to safety. As they docked, Gary stumbled onto the bridge. Captain Vohler stood at the helm, his scales dulled with fatigue. "Dr. Howard," Vohler's voice rasped, "report!" Gary's words tumbled out, describing the impossible structure at the heart of the anomaly. "It's beyond anything we've ever encountered. The power output alone could shatter solar systems." Volar's eyes narrowed. "A weapon, then. We must strike now before it can fully activate." "Wait!" Gary held up his hands. We can't just destroy it. The scientific potential outweighs the risk to countless worlds, Voller interrupted. Your curiosity blinds you to the danger. The bridge crew watched the exchange, tension crackling in the air. Gary took a deep breath, forcing his voice to remain steady. Captain, I understand your concerns, but a preemptive strike could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction. We need more data. Vollar's tentacles writhed with agitation. And how do you propose we obtain this data, Doctor? Gary's mind raced. A small team, covert insertion. We go in, gather intel, and get out. Madness, Voller hissed. You'd be throwing away lives on a fool's errand. I'll lead the mission myself, Gary countered. It's our best chance to understand what we're dealing with. For long moments, Voller was silent. Finally, he gave a curt nod. Very well, but at the first sign of trouble, we pull you out and initiate the attack. Understood? Gary nodded, relief washing over him. Understood, Captain. Thank you. As Gary left to assemble his team, alarms blared throughout the ship. On the main view screen, pockets of swirling antimatter erupted from the anomaly. Voxari fighters swooped into action, their energy weapons carving paths through the cosmic minefield. In the landing bay, Gary met his hastily assembled crew. 2 human scientists stood beside 4 Voxari commandos, their alien weaponry gleaming under the harsh lights. This is what we've trained for, Gary addressed the team. The destiny of the universe rests on what we discover in there. They boarded a sleek stealth craft, its hull designed to bend light and sensor readings around it. As they approached the megastructure's perimeter, Gary's breath caught in his throat. Impossibly vast, the alien construct stretched beyond the limits of human perception. Its surface bristled with strange geometries and pulsing energy fields. Gary's team maneuvered through a dizzying array of defenses, each more mind-bending than the last. Finally, they breached the outer hull. Gary led the way, his suit's sensors struggling to make sense of their surroundings. They entered a cavernous chamber that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Towering columns of swirling energy stretched into infinity. Each housed a maelstrom of space-time distortions, twisting and folding reality itself. The air crackled with power beyond imagining. My God, whispered Dr. Chen, one of the human scientists. It's beautiful. Gary nodded, his scientific curiosity warring with a deep sense of dread. Fan out. Gather as much data as you can, but stay alert. As they delved deeper into the megastructure's labyrinth, a horrifying truth revealed itself. Gary's scanners picked up traces of organic matter. Billions upon billions of discrete genetic signatures. These energy forges, he realized with growing horror. They're powered by harvested life forms. Before anyone could respond, a chittering sound echoed through the chamber. Gary spun, his blood running cold at the sight before him. A tide of cybernetic monstrosities surged towards them, misshapen bodies of countless alien species, fused with cold metal and pulsing circuitry. Their eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence as they advanced on the intruders. Fall back, Gary shouted, firing his weapon. Energy beams lanced out, barely slowing the horde of reanimated guardians. The team retreated deeper into the complex, fighting for every step. Gary's mind raced, searching for a solution as the full scope of their predicament became clear. The central core, he gasped between bursts of weapons fire. If we can overload it, we might be able to shut this whole thing down. They fought their way to a nexus of swirling energy, a singularity of impossible density. Gary's fingers flew over his portable computer, calculating the precise frequency needed to destabilize the system. We'll need to trigger the overload from multiple points, he explained. It's our only chance. The team split up, each member racing to a different control node. Gary input the final calculations, his hands shaking. With a deep breath, he activated the sequence. A wave of chaotic energy erupted from the core, overwhelming the megastructure's defenses. Reality itself seemed to scream as the harvested essence of countless dead worlds clawed its way to freedom. Back to the ship, Gary yelled over the comlink. Move! They sprinted through collapsing corridors as the megastructure began to tear itself apart. Gary's lungs burned as he pushed himself to the limit, the very fabric of space-time unraveling around them. They reached the stealth craft just as a massive shockwave ripped through the complex. Gary threw himself into the pilot's seat, engaging engines as the others strapped in. The small ship rocketed away from the dying megastructure, riding the leading edge of a cosmic tsunami. Through the viewport, Gary watched in awe and terror as reality itself seemed to fold and twist. Volar's fleet, he realized. They're still in range of the blast. Gary pushed the engines beyond their limits, racing to warn the others. The stealth craft bucked and shuddered as it plunged into the heart of the cosmic storm. The stealth craft burst from the cosmic maelstrom, its hull scorched and sparking. Gary Howard gripped the controls, his nucleus tightening as he guided the battered vessel towards the Voxari fleet. The view screen flickered, revealing Captain Volar's flagship looming ahead. "We made it," Dr. Chen gasped, her voice hoarse. Gary nodded, too exhausted for words. As they docked, he saw Volar striding towards them, mandibles twitching with what passed for a Voxari smile. Before the captain could speak, alarms blared throughout the hangar. A Voxari technician's eyes widened as he studied a holographic readout. "Massive energy surge detected. It's coming from the anomaly's coordinates." Gary stumbled to a nearby console, his legs weak from the ordeal. The display showed a wall of impossibly warped space-time hurtling towards them. "It's the megastructure," he croaked. "We destabilized it, but the collapse is generating a shockwave beyond anything we've seen." Volar barked orders, his crew scrambling to battle stations. The fleet's engines flared to life, straining against the pull of the approaching cosmic tsunami. Gary watched in horror as the wave gained on them, reality itself twisting in its wake. A deafening roar filled the ship as the shockwave struck. Metal screamed and buckled. Through the viewports, Gary saw smaller vessels torn apart, their atoms scattered across dimensions. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, a crewman shouted. "We're losing structural integrity." Volar turned to Gary, his alien features set in grim resignation. "We cannot outrun this, but perhaps we can ensure some survive." The captain's claws danced over a nearby console. "Dr. Howard, your team must go. Now." Before Gary could protest, the deck lurched beneath him. He found himself shoved into an escape pod alongside the surviving members of his strike team, the hatch sealed with a hiss. "No!" Gary pounded on the viewport as the pod ejected. He watched helplessly as Volar's flagship was engulfed in hyperdimensional lightning, the massive vessel disintegrating before his eyes. The escape pod tumbled through the chaos, reality itself fragmenting around them. Gary's vision blurred, his mind struggling to process the impossible sights. For an eternal instant, he experienced every possible version of himself across infinite timelines. Then, with a bone-jarring impact, everything stopped. Gary blinked, his surroundings gradually coming into focus. The escape pod system sputtered back to life, revealing a star field utterly devoid of familiar constellations. Where are we?" Dr. Chen whispered, her face pale. Gary studied the readouts, a chill settling in his gut. "I don't know. These readings, they don't match anything in our database. We're completely off the star charts." Days stretched into weeks as they drifted through the cosmic void. Their food synthesizers struggled to keep up, producing ever more unpalatable nutrient paste. The pod's recyclers hummed constantly, each cycle less efficient than the last. Gary watched as his companions succumbed one by one to the crushing weight of their isolation. Dr. Chen curled into a fetal position, muttering equations to herself. The Voxari commandos grew lethargic, their scales dulling as they sank into catatonia. Only Gary clung to hope, poring over the pod systems for any chance of salvation. He cannibalized non-essential components, jury-rigging a crude quantum reactor from the subatomic recyclers. "It has to work," he muttered, his beard long and matted. The math says it's possible." Months passed in a haze of endless calculations and increasingly desperate experiments. Gary worked feverishly, ignoring the stench of decay from his former crewmates. Finally, after countless failures, a spark of energy coalesced within his cobbled-together reactor. Gary's bloodshot eyes widened as he watched a microscopic singularity form, defying the laws of physics. Now or never, he croaked, initiating the final sequence. The universe twisted, folded, and shattered around him. Gary screamed as his very atoms were pulled apart and reassembled across countless realities. An eternity passed in the blink of an eye. Then abruptly it was over. Gary found himself sprawled on scorched earth, acrid smoke burning his lungs. He crawled from the wreckage of the escape pod, his limbs leaden. As his vision cleared, he saw a landscape of utter desolation stretching to the horizon. Realization dawned as he recognized the twisted remains of familiar landmasses through the toxic haze. Somehow, against adversity, he had made it back to Earth. But this was not the world he had left behind. Gary stumbled forward, his laughter a rasping wheeze that devolved into hacking coughs. He had survived the impossible only to find himself the lone witness to humanity's final act of self-destruction.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.